Granted our government a strong mandate is that they believe that the scales of justice have tipped away from the rights of law-abiding citizens and towards the rights of criminals, while the interests of victims were too often ignored. Accordingly, we will be introducing comprehensive legislation later this year to crack down on criminals who commit sexual offenses against children, especially those who continue to violate their conditions while at large.
Public Safety Minister Rob Nicholson talking tough on crime. Couldn't be happier to hear that Canadians may soon see new laws that crack down on our worst criminals. The minister standing shoulder to shoulder with former NHL star Graham James, Victor Sheldon Kennedy this week, making promises that the sexual predators who target children are in for a world of hurt. For Canadians to expect tougher sentences for the peds who lurk in our midst. And I hope it's all true. I hope this is really tough on crime stuff. And it couldn't have come at a better time. Yesterday, there were new charges laid against Gordon Stuckless, a poster pedophile who represents a very big problem in this country. Two more of his assault victims have now come forward to make a case against the former Maple Leaf Gardens usher, a creep who promised kids autographs and Leafs memorabilia, but the only souvenir this monster had to give was a lifetime of emotional scarring. In 1997, Stuckless was convicted of sexually assaulting 24 boys over a 20-year period. His sentence, 2 years less a day. 2 years for assaulting 24 boys. His sentence later was upped to 5 years, but he still got out of jail in 2001 after serving only 2/3 of that small sentence. A woefully short time for the devastation he created. These new changes provide yet another opportunity to make things right. Unfortunately, Canadian justice has long been a joke when it comes to sex crimes. Punishment of pedophiles and other perverts has always lagged way behind the times. I hope the feds are truly ready to take public safety and victims' rights into the 21st century. I hope they're ready to use some Canadian common sense. Gordon Stuckless knew how to abuse his power like so many other pedophiles, offering souvenirs, trips to the storied house of the Leafs Maple Leaf Gardens to meet the players and even have jobs there. But the price was tragically high. The sexual assaults by Stuckless and several other employees went on for years. And Gordon Stuckless, his time in prison, just over 3 years for the sexual predation of 24 young boys. Officially, the number is actually much higher. His joke of a sentence, symptomatic of systemic problems with Canadian justice, a slap in the face of his victims and all those who've suffered from sexual abuse. Because the damage inflicted lasts a lifetime, and the people these perps abuse often become dead inside themselves, sometimes putting themselves out of their misery. Example, Martin Cruz was the first brave person to step forward about his abuse at the hands of Stuckless, which started when he was only 13. Cruz never got over it. 4 days after Stuckless was delivered that joke of a sentence, Martin Cruz killed himself by jumping off Toronto's Bloor Street Viaduct. Now, where did Stuckless end up after just a few years in prison? Coaching hockey in Spain. Coaching young people, putting himself in the path of more victims, like an alcoholic deciding to work in a bar. A story all too similar to that of disgraced hockey coach Graham James. After a 42-month sentence for continuously raping Sheldon Kennedy and several other players, Graham James ends up teaching hockey to kids in Mexico. And for hundreds of rapes of 2 more young players in his trust, Theo Fleury, Todd Holt, Graham James receives a 2-year sentence right here in Winnipeg. 2 kids, hundreds of rapes each. He's already eligible for parole just over a year into his sentence. But that's the out-of-touch nature of sex crimes in Canada. We've always been backward and behind the times when it comes to sexual crime. Until the 1970s, a man could legally rape his wife in this country. In 1980, the Supreme Court of Canada even ruled that a man's honest belief that a woman had consented to sex, even if unreasonable and mistaken, well, it was grounds for acquittal. If he believed it was right, it's right. Now, in this environment, until even the 1980s, penalties for pedophilia weren't just light, they were virtually non-existent. Not until the federal Badgley report in 1984 did awareness kick in. That study found that 50% of women and 33% of males had been victims of one or more unwanted sexual acts. The child sexual abuse problem is serious. Yet, despite increased awareness all these years later, The ultra-light sentences continue, like the case of Newfoundlander Cyril Keats getting a 2-year sentence for decades of child sexual assaults. An example of the ridiculous practice of concurrent sentencing, which allows a PED to serve the sentences for all their crimes at the same time, instead of back to back to back. That would be consecutive sentencing. It's a major loophole in our system, also enjoyed by Graham James and Gordon Stuckless, that prioritizes the pedophile over the victim, fast-tracking their time in prison, speeding up their freedom to find new victims. So Canada doesn't do concurrent sentences for murder. Why allow this insanity when so many lives are destroyed? These new charges against Gordon Stuckless are an opportunity to right the wrongs committed by him and Graham James and Cyril Keats and all their buddies on Pervert Row. I truly hope the feds are serious about keeping these kinds of PEDs locked up, to make examples of them, to classify them for what they are, dangerous offenders. It's way overdue, but it's never too late to do the right thing. That's Canadian common sense.